Good morning, everyone. It's great to see so many familiar names. And if you don't know me, very welcome to be associated with you this morning through this Trident Manor Academy workshop. You perhaps know that my background, many of you looking at the names, many of you recall that I retired last year after 16 years of working as a government security advisor to the government indemnity scheme. Which affected many of you in exhibitions and when we're moving things around. And we're still getting questions. You'd be amazed at the questions and the quandaries that people have when they're planning movement of artwork and collections, whether it be domestically or whether it be internationally. And this workshop this morning will hopefully flag, not just, it will perhaps be a knee-jerk reaction to some, but in others, it will just give you information of what the questions perhaps you could ask of the shippers, fine arts carriers, or give you confidence in when you're making decisions regarding hand carries and other things, whether you're going in the right direction. Hopefully this morning, the outcome of this morning will be to give you confidence that what you are asking of a shipper or a carrier is correct, whether you're talking about a hand carry or whether you're talking about exhibitions locally, just moving collections from venue to store or vice versa. We want to make sure that those collections and those unique items of art remain safe. So moving on to what are the issues? The issues of transportation of any object changes. You can't move a railway locomotive in the same way that you can move a small brooch or some archaeological collection, or indeed oil paintings and the like. Values vary, so we have to think of the values. But if we look at the official line and go to academia about what risk elements are, and I'm not going to touch on all of them, what the risks are to any item when it's moved, is we think about how national and international changes, political and environmental changes can influence this. And those people that live in the south, in the capital in London, will be aware of the ULEV zone, which is one where lorries and other vehicles are going to have to pay additional money on a daily basis to travel into the city centre. There's a move politically to get people to use electric vehicles. Well, electric vehicles are quite costly, but then they have a range issue. And if they are delayed, they can't be towed. They have to be completely lifted on the back of another vehicle and transported. So we have to be aware and make sure in the planning that we have the right type of vehicles and we have the right type of engines to power them, and we have sufficient fuel. Again, an issue with electric vehicles. Anybody that possesses one, quite often at bank holiday weekends, there's queues of 2 and 3 hours queuing at the fuel supply points on motorways and others because the supply can't meet the demand. We look at crime. In Europe, we know full well that organised criminal groups have infiltrated the security companies. They've infiltrated behind the scenes in museums, and going back 6 years, whether it was the Canadian £3 million gold coin that was stolen, or whether it's artwork in Germany, in other places of Germany or Amsterdam, there's an insider knowledge of what's going on. So we have to think about the criminality. Alarms and technology are changing. Whether wireless technologies are moving on, cybercrime is still a primary concern. It's being pushed on every television program on a weekly basis, and you can watch documentaries on that, of how it can affect our collections, how it can affect our systems, and it will affect the delivery of objects. And when we talk about cyber, CCTV and such like are perhaps powered down computer lines rather than telephone lines, and the changes in the next year of doing away with all telephone landlines might impact on this. So we have to be aware of all these major issues. The aspects of risk really that we have to think about, moving on to the next slide, we have to think about what the knowledge is of our assets. We have to have a need to know culture. We don't share everything with everybody. And I'm quite sure that those of you involved in the cultural industry, those registrars, collections, managers, loans, officers and others will be aware that we don't share information widely. We don't use social media. I remember perhaps 4 years ago that a loan was just setting out from Edinburgh to come down to London, and it was great to have it on radio too, to tell us we'd just set out and we were travelling to a big exhibition at one of the London venues. The whole country knew that it was a prestigious object from Scotland going to London. So everybody was looking out for it. So knowledge is one of the things. We need to make sure that we have a good plan. A lack of planning and understanding, and I'll expand on this in a few moments, but we have to be able to plan with the knowledge that the people, the systems, and the delivery of what we're talking about and the methods of delivery are all good. They are all going to happen. They are all going to be seamless, and they will all dovetail into each other so that that delivery takes place according to the contract. Well, I say contract, it might be a contract, and again, I'll expand on that in a moment. We've got to avoid unrealistic schedules. We've got to bear in mind that planning, we've got to have the knowledge that if we're going to move objects in December, perhaps even from late November through to February, March, we can get ice, we can get snow, we can get fog. All of those are going to have an influence on the delivery and the safe movement of collections, the environmental aspects. So would we do it? In certain cases, yes, we must, because as an exhibition is developed or it's going to be launched and it's perhaps planned for 3-5 years in advance, we need to know when the objects are going to be moved and how they're going to be moved. But we must have regard to some of these risks as part of that planning process. And the methods that we're going to move objects by must be tested. So there's lots of movements at the moment among some shippers to go to different carry cases. We need to make sure that they are resilient and they've met the audit tests, and they've done some physical testing, like the security element. When we're talking about windows and doors, we actually have physical tests and go to destruction on these objects to test them. Has that really happened on some of these devices and amenities that people are marketing as being secure? And then we move on to the delivery. I talked about the unrealistic delivery schedules, but if we're going to cut corners, then we are increasing the risks. And the consequences are potential accident, fire. Fire usually follows in accidents, particularly in relation to goods vehicles these days. The materials that people use in vehicles for the brakes and the gearing is quite inflammable, and as a design feature they cite this directly above the hot exhaust manifold. This doesn't necessarily apply to electric vehicles, but it does in the case of many petrol and diesel vehicles. So we have to make sure that within the consequences we are going to deliver in a planned, steady way. We don't want to be the hare, we want to be the tortoise. So the risks are there. Moving on to expand on the planning. When we're talking about the planning, sometimes we're dealing with a framework. So we go out at the beginning of financial year and we will commission a number of companies to supply a service. That might be through a tender. In other cases, depending on the value of that movement or the distance, it might be a simple email request. It could be a phone call if it's in an emergency. It could be as simple as booking a private hire vehicle to pick something up as a hand carry. It could be person to person. It might be that you're talking to somebody regarding another matter and you say, can we arrange for something else to be done? Really, what you're doing is creating a contract, and you have to have regard for what the risks are, and as part of those risks, what the insurance requirements might be to meet yours as a lender or yours as a borrower, what those requirements are going to be. And then as part of those insurance or indemnity requirements, you need to make sure that those conditions are built in. We have to be conscious, as I've mentioned, about cybercrime. We have to be discreet in the way that we share the information. And we have to also be discreet when, or have an expectation and ensure that the companies that we're using are discreet as well, that they don't go down to the local when they finished at whatever time they finish these days, on a weekday night or even at weekends, and they don't share that information within a pub, hostelry, restaurant, or indeed within families. Work stops with work. Domestic matters, they can usually remain hopefully in the home as well. Moving on to the knowledge element. Knowledge comes from any real reliable source. It might be the police, it might be border agencies, it might be shippers, it might be in-house, it might be through the UKRG or a body involving a group of us. But we need to make sure that our knowledge is reliable. We need to have a knowledge of what the objects are that we're going to be moving, their dimensions, their weight, their intrinsic material. When we're moving jewelry, usually we can deal with, one thinks of bullion vehicles in some cases if they're moving around London. But in the relation to art and collections, do we use bullion vehicles? Are they with run flat tires? Have they got fenders all the way around to prevent an accident or minimize damage to the vehicle if there was an accident? Are the sides of the vehicles that we use, are they actually resistant to attack? Is the roof or the underside of a similar material? There's many programs on the television, the heists in relation to the dome, the vaults, and the train robberies and other things, where we see it's just so easy just to cut through a side of a vehicle. We need to make sure what the vulnerabilities are and mitigate against these as best we can. We need to know if an object's been targeted previously. We know if we go to Amsterdam and such, and Germany, the same paintings have been targeted by individuals 4 or 5 times. We need to make sure, well, begs the question, why would somebody want to steal these same items? The criminal underworld use them as currency. That's why they use them to actually support their dealings in drugs and other substances as a part of their commodity. So we need to make sure we know the history of the objects that we're talking about when it's coming into our country. And we need to make sure that we can meet bespoke requirements to carry out the work. Government indemnity is an interesting one, in so much that couriers are required under certain circumstances. But also, when one's dealing with high value and high risk objects, we perhaps do need to have a follow vehicle. We do need to have some security operatives rather than just a courier following in a vehicle. We have to make sure that these objects are going to be safe. As I've mentioned, have there been issues in the past? Yes, there have in some cases, but that is object specific, and we need to make sure that we are not overreacting to some of these situations. And what are the likely threats to delay delivery? Well, I talked about the weather, But we could also talk about industrial action, either this side or the other side of the channel. Egypt at the moment, there's not much moving around Egypt if we were planning any form of exhibition going over there. We have to think about all these different political and industrial actions. We talked about the weather. We can also talk about roadworks. Would we move things knowing full well that there's going to be 16 miles of queues on the M1 in Bedfordshire this weekend because the road's going to be closed? And how is this information shared? Well, much of it is in public domain, but there is also the case of taking the initiative individually or within our teams and actually planning, and in some cases carrying out a dummy run using the computers, using technology, and making sure that we can have delivery as and when we want it. We also, as part of the knowledge, have to be aware that when we're dealing with insurance and indemnity, if we have to consider these things, because if an incident were to happen and we haven't taken out specific insurance on the objects, then if the carrier is just a member of the Road Haulage Association, it depends on the weight of the objects, and it then is paid out up to a maximum of £20,000, which is actually minuscule compared to perhaps the value of the individual object. So the method, moving on to the method. We have to think about having it documented. If anybody ever challenged what we're saying, we need to make sure that we've got a plan. We've got something that's agreed between ourselves and the supplier. We need to make sure that we've agreed the time of the activity, and some of this is repeating what I've mentioned a few moments ago. Are we talking about a daytime or a nighttime? Daytime, we can see what's going on. Nighttime, somebody can soon switch the lights out, or there could be a problem at night. And unless you have got some form of plan with additional lighting, it is quite difficult sometimes to see, and it increases the risks. Peak time delays I've mentioned. We also need to think about pickup times, delivery times. We need to think about queuing traffic. I'm concentrating a lot on traffic because this presentation is geared to transportation of art and collections. We need to think about what is the level of contractors involved, or are they staff? Have we gone just to one party, or are they commissioning another party? And are they all signed up to the same conditions? There should be somebody within the company that who's delivering the method, planning it, whether there's lifting, whether there's moving on dollies, whether there's using forklifts on the back of vehicles. We need to make sure that people are supervised. Where they're not supervised and an incident happens, insurance might be invalid. Indemnity requires that there is supervision throughout the journey and at the loading and dismantling of any exhibition. But we also have to think about who the staff are, the skills. I remember a few years ago that somebody was moving something on a couple of small dolly trolleys, and they were going to load it just onto the forklift at the back of a truck, and the youth at the back, and it was a youth who only been employed for a couple of weeks, put his shoulder to it, gave it almighty welly as he was pushing it up onto this slope, and the front wheels went up nicely, but as the back wheels on the dolly hit the lip of the forklift, of course, it toppled over because he was pushing at the top half, and the dolly shot out from backwards under his legs, and the object was in a decent case. The case was severely damaged, but we also need to make sure that not just the case is damaged, we need to make sure the object's inside. If it's fragile, I'm quite sure we would have had a huge claim made against that individual. So we need to make sure that the people who are moving objects are skilled and trained in lifting and moving fine art. The staff requirements always say when from an indemnity, and I encourage that there is always 2 or more people with a vehicle. A vehicle should never be left. Even if it's stopping on a motorway service, people are desperate to go to use the cloakroom, bathroom. One person stays with the vehicle and one person goes inside, and then they switch over. Is the person skilled or trained? They have to be experienced is the definition that is used in many contracts. But how many people question what that skill or training is? And that relates to the handling. And one of the things that will be mentioned at the end of this course, or at the end of this workshop rather, is the fact that there is a course now, accredited course, that drivers can go on, drivers of fine art vehicles, so they have a security awareness training. Those of you that watch the television might have seen the blue light last night in Northern Ireland, where people went into an ambush unwittingly. Some people knew, some people didn't. People have to be aware of reading the circumstances. If you see a group of high vehicles in a motorway services and you've got a narrow gap in the middle, or can you go and park your vehicle in the open space away from those vehicles? Where do you choose as an individual making a personal choice? You always try and get in a place where it's easy. You like to have surveillance around you. You like to be able to see your vehicle from the windows of the restaurant or the services as you're walking in and out. You don't want it squashed between other goods vehicles where you can't see it and anybody can just do a quick in and out job, breaking in, breaking a window, stealing possessions, or indeed in the case of fine art, breaking into the vehicle or damaging the vehicle. We need to ensure that the route, when we're talking again, transportation, it might be shipping, it might be air freight, it might be on a train. We have to make sure that it is as direct as possible. We have to give consideration to the route. We do not want, and I'll mention this in a few moments, we do not want vehicles going from A to B to C to Z, stopping at 26 different locations or 25 different locations before they get to their destination. Every time the stop happens, that's increasing the liability and the risks to the objects. Is the security where it's stopping? We're opening the doors. We're not mobile. When a vehicle's mobile, it's harder to attack. But when it's stationary, the doors are open and people are opening the tailgates and the back. Perhaps one of the crew has left the vehicle unattended. That is heightening the risks. So the locations, as I mentioned a few moments ago, we have to pick the right location, or we have to mitigate by having a security presence and having a secure environment where we can load and offload our collections and artwork. Excuse me. Right, the next slide is about the delivery. We have to scan. I talked about the teams. I know this weekend I'm going up to the opening of a new museum up in north of Northumberland. I looked at the weather forecast last night. The weather's going to be bad. I know that there's roadworks around the A1, around Team Valley and round Gateshead. So I have to allow a little bit more time. I'm in a vehicle that is not electric, but I know that before I go, I will have sufficient fuel in. But what I don't know is whether there's going to be any form of industrial action that might put more vehicles on the road or might actually threaten my journey and delay it. We have to make sure as part of our delivery, all these aspects are considered. We have to, as part of that method, the method statement, we have to make sure that all actions are agreed by all the contractual parties, and that might be subcontractors. we have to do our bit. We have to make sure that if they say that they are, if the contractor is saying they're going to put 2 vehicles and they're going to have a follow vehicle, then that should be applied. We have to make sure that the equipment, whether it be the tail lift, whether it be the locks on the doors, whether it be the vehicle itself, is of the right size and suited for the purpose for the specific objects. I remember again some years ago going to an exhibition and planning, and I required that the fire service attend, and they attended a venue, but then they realized the fire service had never attended through the given route into a particular estate in Norfolk. And as a consequence, the fire engine couldn't get over the bridge or through the archway, and it had to go 3 miles further round, which was causing an undue delay. We have to make sure when we got a vehicle that it is the right size and the right height to get down the slope, get into the undercroft, go meet a door, get into a doorway, or we have to park it outside, secure the space outside, as I mentioned a few moments ago, because the vehicle's not suited necessarily or ideally suited for getting inside a loading bay or inside a garage. We have to make sure that the staff are trained, that we are reliant, that they are well rested, that they have not done a full night shift and then been expected to get in a vehicle and drive up to Newcastle from London. They have to be qualified or experienced. As I've said, experienced is one of the words, but they have to be qualified if they're driving a goods vehicle of a certain type. There are age restrictions relative to the size of a vehicle, and indeed if they're towing any form of trailer behind. They are separate qualifications that people need to have. But as I mentioned, does it come with recognised supervision? Is there somebody from the company there supervising, or is it the courier that supervises, if there is one? It should be the company who we're commissioning to do this work as part of the delivery. They should be supervisors. They should know the methods. They must be experienced. And when it comes to the driving, again, is the driver qualified? Now there is qualifications available in security awareness. Communications are key. And whilst people can use technology and tracking real time, it is possible that through each of the shippers, they can track a vehicle real time, know exactly where it is. That doesn't necessarily mean that the objects in the back are at the same place as the vehicle itself. But we can use these systems. We can use radios, we can use mobile phones, and they are lifetime. They are passing information back, whether it be from the environment, whether it be measuring shock, inertia, speed. All these systems are available to us so that we can see what is happening. But we also have to have contingency planning. We have to make sure what is going to happen if using the expression, the wheel comes off. Some years ago, I was in Russia before certain atrocities happened, and I said to the director of this Russian transport company, what are your measures if you're going on a journey from St. Petersburg to Moscow? What is your remedial action? What's your contingency if your vehicle gets a flat tire and gets a puncture? Our vehicles never get flat tires, was the reply. I said, okay. What happens if they break down? Our vehicles never break down. As a consequence, we had a little bit of spit for spat of throwing cultural attaches out of Russia and London and vice versa, but all as a result of a very high value exhibition. And I wasn't prepared to take the risk. I asked what the contingency planning was, and they didn't have it. They were sort of winging it or had it written on the back of a flag packet. So we need to make sure that there is contingency. We need to make sure, again, if there was a fire, what happens? Well, we have the vehicles carrying fire extinguishers. But are the people driving, are the crews, are those people in the vehicle behind? And some of this has been specified when we've been dealing with high value, excessive value loads, if you like, in the past with government indemnity. We have required that the follow car actually carries a fire extinguisher and the operatives in the back are trained to use it. So we need to make sure that all these types of planning are available. So that's the delivery. Not much more now from me, and then we'll move into some questions from yourselves. So do think and keep putting them in, sending them through to Louise at the email address that she gave. So what happens if we follow all the delivery plan and it goes ahead? Hopefully the delivery arrives on time, complete, no issues, no damage, no loss. Everybody's happy. And the vast majority of cases happen like that. There might be just a simple delay for some reason. There might have been delay in the packing, there might be delay in departure, but the consequences, we are late. We perhaps have to pay overtime, we have to keep a venue open, or we might have to go and find somewhere for the shipment to park overnight in a separate place, which is going to incur cost. And then we have to make sure that individual venue where the load is going to be is safe and secure. And we also have to then find accommodation and safe whereabouts for the crew and or driver to, if we can lock the vehicle in an alarmed environment, a safe environment, that is what we have to do. So there's cost implications and delay implications. But if there's delivery and there is complete, but with loss or damage, there's paperwork. Do we continue? Do we offload the damaged item? Do we actually have to report it to the insurance or the indemnity scheme to make sure that before it can go, as part of the conditions, we perhaps have to get a loss adjuster or somebody to look at it? It might be that the delivery then is aborted and taken back to the owner, because the owner's wishes might also be paramount in these decisions. There might be a financial penalty. Financial penalty is that the exhibition might not open. There might be legal recourse. It might be that the owner suggests that somebody hasn't done something, that they haven't followed the delivery plan, they haven't followed the method statement, and there could be litigation. And all of that leads to a reputational risk for everybody involved in these operations and a loss of future business. When we talk about reputational risk, this applies in so many walks of life. Last year, it was education and Ofsted reports. The reputation of a head teacher, was it worth the life? And is our lives, when we're registrars and or loans officers and people dealing with commissioning shipments and transport contracts, is it worth all the heartbreak if we get it right and we follow the guidelines and we plan effectively? Then we hopefully will have a good delivery, as in the top line there, that it's delivery according to plan. And if it isn't, if there are minor skirmishes or there are minor problems, then what I've just done as the final slide is to talk about possible remedial action. We have to make sure that all the equipment, the vehicles and their systems are maintained and suited to meet those contractual requirements. So if we have got locks in the back of our vehicle, on the back of our vehicle, have we got alarms in the goods area on the back of the vehicle? The goods area, of course, should always be separated to the cab where the drivers and any passengers are. It must be a separate lockable area. Have we got an alarm technology in there so that the alarm is set and if anybody goes in there, it sets the alarm off. But we also need to perhaps know, is everything securely strapped and packed in the back? Are the packing cases on the base, or are they stacked one top of the other? So is it that we need to ensure that we need additional equipment in the form of CCTV in the back of the vehicle to record anybody and any movements in the back, so that we can see retrospectively what is happening, what has happened? I am aware of people actually breaking into vehicles and being carried in vehicles as stowaways. That was an individual occasion when a vehicle had been in a high-risk area, and through human error, the doors weren't locked properly. There was no harm done, there was nothing lost, nothing damaged, but there could have been. It was as easy as that. We need to ensure that the staff, when I say are vetted, trained. When staff are employed, they perhaps go through a DBS check. Is it ever repeated? Some people have worked for the same company for 20 years. Does that mean to say that their lifestyles that they live are beyond their normal means? Have they won the pools? Or are they taking some form of backhand, or are they taking some form of goods through through ill means or crime, which are they associated with organized criminal groups? And we need to make sure that all staff engaged in the movement artwork are trained, but they are also competent, and they are also recognized as being trustworthy. I talked about ensuring real-time communications. It is quite possible, or it is regular occurrence, that you can, a company can track movements of vehicles. It is possible through agreement that anybody who has a control room can track the vehicle on its movement. But then anybody can, if they've got the right passwords and the right scanners and the skills to do that. So we have to make sure, if there isn't a need to track a vehicle, and the goods and the shipping company can tell you when a goods vehicle is about to arrive. It's going to arrive, and it's going to be in an IVCO truck. It's going to be registered number A, B, and C, and the driver will be called John, and they will be pulling up at such and such an entrance to your venue in 15 minutes. That is pretty good information. Do you need to actually track a vehicle? And my answer to that is perhaps no, except where it is high risk and the lender requires it. And we have had cases in the UK where objects have had to be tracked by the receiving venue as a requirement of lender contracts. And we have to make sure that all staff are aware of emergency and contingency plans and have been trained to dealing with predictable incidents. So we talk about flat tires. What happens if a vehicle is diverted off route? What happens if that suddenly there is an incident in front and that there are people standing in the street waiting or looking aggressive? What is the action that's taken? Do all vehicles that we use actually carry a card saying, I do not stop on the roadside, but I will travel to nearest police station where I will stop my vehicle? Do the lorry drivers have that? And do you require it as a lender or a person commissioning this service? All of these are measures that we can use to ensure the safeguarding or the secure transportation of art and our collections. And I hope that that is a starter for a discussion that we can have for the next 15 minutes or so in answer to some of your questions. So thank you, Louise. Thank you for your attention. and we will, that is our contact details. Louise has put her name up there and the Trident Manor, but I'm sure you know that if you put william.brown in front of that tridentmanor.com, you can get hold of me as well. So thank you for your attention, and we'll now go back to Louise, who will manage the questions. Thank you.
I want to track live transport and be able to communicate with the transport agent, courier, or the lender. I know some people have WhatsApp groups set up, and this has worked successfully. But is this fully secure, and are there any apps or other proven methods where I wouldn't need to share personal information like a mobile number, and where this information is encrypted?
I think perhaps I've answered some of that already in my previous responses. Is there a need that you need to track the vehicles? Is it a legal or is it a contractual requirement, or is it just a wish list? Because it's something else that somebody's going to do. When a vehicle's on the move, as I say, you really want to have a notification on any delays, and the shippers can do that because the vast majority of shippers actually are tracking the vehicle. WhatsApp, I don't necessarily want to comment on the security value of WhatsApp, but as you rightly say, you're disclosing mobile numbers and you're sharing information, which is encrypted to a certain end-to-end encryption. So it could be used, but is there any benefit? You can talk to people. Is it all work? Is it social? And the systems exist. Like say that there are many tracking devices, satellites, as you can get a tracker on a mobile phone, or you can just put track on your mobile phone itself. You can see where, if you know that somebody's escorting a shipment, they can actually just alert the tracker, and then you can switch it off when it's finished. But if anybody's phone is going to be tracked, you have to legally, under data protection, you have to tell them that their phone is being tracked if it's another employee. But yeah, the systems are available for tracking. Shippers do it regularly, and as I mentioned, in some cases lenders have insisted on it when high value or irreplaceable objects were brought in from the States in the past, but that was perhaps a one-off. I'm not aware of it being regular that lenders would insist on that.
If my transport is in an accident, so we're thinking by road, while first priority is for the driver, the technician and the courier, what measures are in place to secure the collections on board? If this is a shared transport, how is this resolved between the owners, particularly if in a foreign country and no onboard courier from the organisation?
I'm sure some people have perhaps experienced this, and I haven't. But again, it comes to that planning. It comes to contingency planning, knowing what can be done. If a vehicle's involved in an accident, there's certain things that's legal requirement. In some countries, the driver is automatically arrested, whether that's any fault of theirs or otherwise. So one's got to think of that. But provided you've got to have lifetime communication, that information needs to be fed back to the shipping company. They should have some form of insurance / contingency plan, depending on the value of the work, depending in the country that people are at. The police are notified that there is a load, and in many cases, the police are aware when there are extreme high value loads. Where a load is got different collections in it, there is that financial limit one hopes that shippers wouldn't exceed. But if it belongs to other people, it's like a salvage list. I think the question that's perhaps being asked is, what are the priority objects for removal? And I think all artwork has to be dealt with. And that's why we say, right, well, have we got fire suppression in the back of the vehicle? Have we got people following who are trained in the use of fire extinguisher? One hopes that this situation never actually arises, but the vehicle should never be left unattended. And I do know that where breakdowns have occurred in this country, the police have been informed, and the police have been and remained with the vehicle until that a replacement vehicle or a rescue vehicle has come, repaired the carrying vehicle on the roadside, and it's then carried on its journey. The best place for the objects, if they are not damaged, is actually to remain in the back of the vehicle in a secure environment. And as I mentioned in the latter part of the presentation, many vehicles don't have alarms in the back, many don't have CCTV. But if that was the case, provided there is an individual power supply not relying on the vehicle battery itself, then hopefully in the case of a collision, those images would be still available in live time and streamed back. So it gives you that confidence. Stephen's come in and asked a question in the line regarding tracking with lower value items. It may be worth considering a lone worker app or alarm. Many also have tracking element. Absolutely. I mentioned that mobile phones have a tracker of capability, but if people are carrying low value objects, it depends whether they're national collections and what their value are, the dimensions are. And people do hand carry, but they are never lone worker. They are also actually, there is always two people present, so an object is never left unattended on a seat of a train, on a seat of a bus, in the back of a taxi. There are also always two people, but there are devices available, and I'm sure that the Security Advisor Arts Council and other people can excuse me, can give advice on those tracking elements, the lone worker app. Stephen, thank you very much for adding that in.
Thank you, William, for this morning. I'm sure that's been really helpful for everyone here. Just a couple of points I'd like to share before we close for this session. As William mentioned earlier on, we do have a driver focused training programme, and this is our level 3 protective transportation of high value artefacts. It's a fairly new programme that we've developed, and it is NCFE accredited, and I believe it's a 3-day programme. So within them 3 days, you are looking at some theoretical elements of being proactive within risk assessing and risk management. But there is the practical element as well, where you can actually demonstrate these new skills you've learned with regards to transporting high value artifacts. So if that is of interest to anyone, please feel free to get in touch, and I can help with giving more information on that. We have planned to deliver it in the Northeast, but it is one of them programs where we're lucky and we can deliver it sort of elsewhere across the UK, and even internationally if needed. So if that is of interest to anyone, please feel free to reach out. The second point, and I mentioned just at the start, about the IAASF annual conference. So this is heavily focused on cultural protection, safety and security within the cultural sector. And this year's theme, we are looking at protecting cultural venues during uncertain times. So within this, we are looking at the conflicts that are going on, around the world that we've seen for the past year, nearly even 2 years. It'll be coming up. It's really been in the news. We've all seen what's going on regarding Ukraine. They need a lot of help and support with materials, how they can secure their artefacts and their assets, etc. So that is what we really want to focus on this year, and it's taking place in Redwood Hall Hotel in County Durham, so up here in the Northeast, and that is from the 11th to the 13th of September. So it's about five and a bit months away. We've had an amazing input from international speakers this year. So there'll be up to 20 educational sessions from them, discussing things like the threats from fire, impact of conflict. Again, we'll be discussing the transportation of artefacts as well. And also looking into the future, what is important to be considered when dealing with things like this. There'll be time for delegates to look at our exhibitors and sponsors that are supporting us this year, which we are very excited about. And there's different sort of activities that are going to be taking place across the 3 days. So we have a network session for all speakers, delegates, and the exhibitors, just to see who's there, get to know each other, and liaise with everyone there. You couldn't, it's a great opportunity to make some new business connections as well. On the second day, we've got a really exciting gala dinner that's going to take place. It's still in development now, but it's going to be a great opportunity as well for some fundraising activities regarding Ukraine and the conflicts that are ongoing over there. We've got further announcements to make yet, but I can promise you to definitely check back regarding that. There'll be a lot shared across our social media for the IAASF and also the Trident Manor webpage. So just to end, the early bird tickets are available for the conference now. So please do make sure to check those out. They are available via Eventbrite, but if anyone would like me to send the direct link to the page, please feel free to contact me and I can email that across. But again, it's across our social media, it's across our website, and it's definitely worth taking advantage of the offers that are available now whilst they are. And we hope to see many of you there as well this year. So I believe that is all from myself and William. William, I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to mention quickly.
No, that's it. Thank you. We're on time. We like to be on time. We don't like to be delayed. And I appreciate you all taking time out this morning to join us all, and hope that we can meet up again virtually or indeed in September to further discuss and make sure that our jobs are happy and safe. Thank you very much.